Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. This is our Week 12 waiver wire video. It's late Sunday night. My Vikings just lost to the Bears. Congrats, Bears fans, you beat us. Now, before we get into the waiver wire video, I want to take a moment to thank all of you that have been a part of the community for the past year and a half. Thank you for those that have subscribed, watched. We appreciate that so much. Continue to help us grow the product, and you can do that a few ways. Continue to watch, make comments on the videos, like, and share videos with others. And the other thing that you can do is hit the notification button so when new videos or contests, we're going to have some contests coming up in the near future here, come out, you're aware of it. And what we want to do is every resource that comes back into us, we're trying to put right back into the site. Better audio, visual, information for you guys, better research, stuff like that to help you improve so that you can have the best fantasy season possible out there. Now, if you're looking at the video, maybe you have injuries or you want to improve your bench depth, whatever it might be, or maybe you have a team on the bye. Next week, you've got Kansas City and the Rams are on a bye. So it's only two teams, yet those two teams carry a lot of big names in fantasy. Now, before we get into this, the final thing we always tell people is you got to take this information, you got to contextualize it for your league. Every league is different. Settings are different, scorings are different, etc. And so you got to take the information and flex it. Now, before we get into the video, anything you want to add to this?
No, absolutely. Like you mentioned, one thing is that there are only two teams on a bye this week, so that changes things up a little bit because there are so many more teams playing just because it's Thanksgiving. But otherwise, it's a pretty normal week. So we'll just get right into it, I suppose.
Okay. So the first quarterback I think you need to consider out there if you're looking for one is Baker Mayfield, who's 59% available playing Cincinnati. Cincinnati allows the most points to quarterbacks. In fact, going into this week, that defense was on pace to allow the most yards ever by a defense in NFL history. 3 weeks in a row, they had allowed a total of 500 yards in 3 consecutive games. I mean, that's a lot of yards. These guys are bleeding yards. They were just brutal. Now, the Bengals defense today didn't allow as many yards and points that they had going into this week playing the Ravens, but part of the reason why is they're facing a rookie quarterback, Lamar Jackson. If you watch that game, it was like watching a college game. And they really played it conservatively there, and so the defense allowed less yards, but I think that had to do with game flow and who they're facing and things like that. Now, if you look at Baker overall, who's the first overall pick from this year, he's improved as the year has went on. He's gotten better and better. He had his best game last time he played against Atlanta. He had 3 touchdown passes and a quarterback rate of 151.3. In fact, if you look at the last 4 games during that stretch, he's got 9 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions. So this guy's playing better. He's got a great matchup this week against a terrible defense. I really like Baker Mayfield. I think he's a great streaming option this week.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I like that pick. Fairly highly available. All right, so now we know a lot of you guys aren't going to be very excited or this pick isn't going to be too popular, but Jameis Winston, for one, he's 91% available, and if you're desperate, we've talked about, I know people who are in 2 quarterback leagues, and so you may find yourself needing to pick up Jameis Winston, but there are reasons. It's not just because he's available, and I know that we've gotten pushback on that. Rob, you promoted him, I believe it was last week, and what did exactly someone say to you? Or
well, there's a few weeks ago that we said, you know, he's going to get an opportunity to play again, and a number of people came out and said, no, he's not going to. And the reason why you felt he wouldn't get another chance to play was because if he plays and he gets hurt, then the Bucs are guaranteed they have to pay him like $20 million next season or something like that. So why risk it? Why play him? But I think there's a lot of incentive for them to play him. And once again, he came in today. So, but that's what it was. That was the pushback I got, was the idea is they're not going to play him. They're not going to risk an injury and have to pay him $20 million next year of guaranteed money.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about it. He was a first-round draft pick. He was a guy that they tried to bring in to kind of fix their team, and he's not actually been too horrible. He hasn't been great, but in his first 3 seasons, each year he improved his QBR. And in fact, he's only played 3 games this season where he's played the full game as the starting quarterback. And in one of those games, he was the #1 fantasy quarterback. In another of those games, he was the 3rd best fantasy quarterback. I know that there's a little bit going on there where it's like the Bucs are terrible. Jameis Winston scares us. We're not sure if he's going to play. If he does play, like, he's a good fantasy option. That defense is awful. The receiving core is pretty good. The tight ends, he's got 2 good tight ends to throw to, and the running game is awful. You know, there's a real recipe for success there. So I know he makes us uncomfortable, but if you are looking for a plug and play for a week, or your quarterback situation isn't great, you got to get your emotions aside and understand that the numbers fantasy-wise are there, even if they're not there as far as his overall quarterback play goes.
All right. So another guy out there is Andy Dalton. So Andy Dalton's facing Cleveland now in the 15th most points to quarterbacks. Now, A.J. Green may be back. There was some conversation he might come back this week, but most of that came from the head coach. Most people around that situation, most experts that know the injury, have said that he's a couple weeks away, probably looking at the beginning of December there. So we'll see. But he could be back next week. That would be a huge boost for Andy Dalton out there. Now, for me, I think that he's playing Cleveland, allowing the 15th most points to quarterbacks. That looks like it's a decent matchup. I do have concerns. One, it's an outdoor game. This time of year, weather becomes an issue. And I also think the possibility of a lower scoring game there could drive down the need to throw. And so I look at him. If AJ's Green there, I love the matchup. Without AJ Green, it concerns me. It scares me a little bit. No, so what I would probably say is if you're really desperate, you could play this guy. But with only 2 teams on a bye, you won't have to go as deep into the waiver wire this week. And so there's probably better options out there for you. But once again, Andy Dalton, 42% available, facing Cleveland, allowing the 15th most points to quarterbacks. Monitor the AJ Green situation a lot because that's going to fluctuate his value.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now we have Dak Prescott. He's 53% available. He's a fairly good option. Now you look at he's playing the Washington Redskins, who give up the 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, so slightly on that positive side, but not too far. Again, playing the Redskins, they're actually a pretty solid defense. Don't underestimate them in that aspect. The reason, or I guess the one reason that I would say maybe like Dak Prescott this week is his running ability has really picked up lately. In fact, we've seen that from a few quarterbacks, guys like Mitchell Trubisky, who have surprised us this week against the Vikings. And in fact, Trubisky has the second most rushing yards this year. But that's something that surprised us. But
they actually overtook Cam Newton, so now he's the number 1 rushing quarterback. So yeah.
I didn't know that. I guess I didn't finish
in
the
that
game.
Yeah. So.
Wow. But anyways, Dak Prescott has kind of followed along with some of these quarterbacks who've been doing that recently. He's had 4 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. He's not throwing the ball amazing. The receiving core isn't awesome, but he's running the ball. He's playing okay. So again, not going to be your starting quarterback for the season, but if you're looking for a 1-week option, Prescott might be the guy.
All right. So there's Eli Manning. Eli Manning is 78% available out there versus Philadelphia, allowing the 7th most points to quarterbacks. I'll be honest with you, Eli Manning scares me. He just really does. But if you look at the last 2 weeks, he's had 5 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions. After starting the year slow, it looks like he's picking things up quite a bit there. He scares me. But here's the thing. He's surrounded by great weapons. And it's really hard to ignore that. And so you look at, he's got Saquon Barkley, who's got great hands. He's a great pass-catching running back. You look at Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram. And so once again, he's got a decent matchup against Philadelphia, allowing the 7th most points to quarterbacks. He's 78% available, and he's got great weapons around him. And in the last couple games, he's made some improvements. Looks like maybe Sherman has turned that offense around a little bit there. And so for some of you, he's a guy that you could pick up.
All right, now we got a name that I think is a little bit newer, a little fresher. Not everybody knows. Nick Mullins, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He's, of course, very available at 93%. We like him. Now, of course, he is, the third string guy. It's surprising that he's even in there. But he's played well, and I think it has to do with that system. He had a huge first game where he went out for 262 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. He took a slight step back versus the Giants, but he actually wasn't terrible. 250 yards and 1 touchdown. Again, not great, but he did throw 1 touchdown, and I really like that offensive system built around him. And then, of course, they play Tampa Bay that gives up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and so honestly, I think he's a good option this week. I really do. Again, he's in a good system that 49ers have really built, and then has a good matchup. So I don't know if you agree with that or disagree with that, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, he's got a great matchup. You can't ignore it. So we'll just go through just a number of guys out there that aren't maybe highly available, and we'll talk about a few guys that we think that you need to avoid. First guy that's not highly available, but you need to consider that is Mitch Trubisky, who's 22% available out there. So not a lot, but for a decent amount of you, he is available. Playing Detroit, allowing the 13th most points to quarterbacks. He currently leads all quarterbacks in rushing yards. Overtook Cam Newton tonight, Sunday night's game. He has 3 rushing touchdowns on the year. If you look at the first 3 weeks of the year, he looked brutal, but he's really turned things around there. Since week 3, he's got 14 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, so he's really picked up his game quite a bit there. Once again, I like Mitch Trubisky. Not widely available for 22% of you. He will be out there, plays Detroit, allowing the 13th most points to quarterbacks.
Yeah, another one is Matthew Stafford, 27% available. Coming off a couple of weeks with tough matchups against the Bears and against the Vikings and such, but had a decent day, 220 yards and a touchdown. Again, he's not highly available, but he is Matthew Stafford. That offense is picking up. Kerryon Johnson is picking up. Kenny Golladay, I had him ranked a lot higher than most people at the beginning of this year, and a lot of people were surprised. They were so confident in him. They traded Golden Tate. Of course, there's Marvin Jones, and so, yeah, Matthew Stafford, not highly available, but if he's out there, he is an option.
So I want to talk about a few quarterbacks that I think you might be tempted to pick up and use, but we would advise to stay away from. The first guy is Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles is 78% available. Now he's playing the Bills. The Bills allow the second fewest points to quarterbacks. And what we've been saying for a long time is the Jags want to win games running the ball, playing defense, low scoring, and really allowing Blake Bortles to make some high percentage throws and not take a lot of chances there. We saw that today. They look great. Looked like they won a game when Pittsburgh came back and won that one, but that's the formula for success. Now, sometimes Blake Bortles can garner fantasy value. If you looked at his career, when their team has fallen behind, they've had to throw a lot. He's made a career off of what we call garbage time statistics. But this is not a game that's going to happen. The Bills are not going to score a lot of points. They're going to force them to have to throw the ball quite a bit. The garbage time stats aren't going to be there. I expect a lower scoring game once again. 78% available. Playing the Bills allowing the second fewest points to quarterback, and then you add the fact that he's turnover prone. He's unpredictable. You can't trust Blake Bortles. I would stay away from him in this game.
Yeah, another guy to mention is Derek Carr. Derek Carr is 81% available. He's a big name. People like Derek Carr, but that team is a bit of a mess right now, still recovering from losing their best wide receiver in Amari Cooper, and they play the Baltimore Ravens, who are one of the best defenses in the NFL. I wouldn't touch the situation, that's for sure.
Yep. Another guy I'd stay away from out there is Case Keenum. 84% available. He's playing Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh, we went back to last year, they lost Ryan Shazier. They went through a stretch of about 11 to 12 games where they were really bad, allowing around 30 points per game, but they've turned it around quite a bit. In fact, in the last 6 games, they're only allowing 18 points per game. Currently, they're leading the NFL in sacks. And you look at Case Keenum, he's had 4 times this year where he's throwing 0 touchdown passes. He's not worth risking it. Stay away from Case Keenum this week.
Yeah, I like that. Another one would be Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's a guy who's exciting because he just got the job. He's a rookie. He had all those crazy rushing yards, but unusually enough, he was far more effective rushing than he was passing. There's a reason he's 89% available. In fact, I don't know why there's 11% of people who have him in their league. It must be very deep leagues. Plays Oakland, who gives up the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. But do you really think that the Ravens are going to allow Oakland to score? I don't think so. I don't think Baltimore is going to be pressed to score that many points. On top of that, they have said, coaches came out and said that it was clear that if Flacco was healthy, he would play. So A, that says that he is not the starter, right? Like they're not too excited about him. But B, any day now, Flacco can be healthy, right? At some point, Flacco's going to come back. He's going to lose that job. And of course, you have to make your waiver wire pickups before you know for certain if Flacco is going to be back. And so I'm honestly expecting that there's a very good chance Jackson doesn't play. And if he does, he plays very, very conservatively. They're not letting him throw the ball too much. They just want to play defense, run a ball, and win on field goals and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was watching the game today, and it felt like I was watching Princeton versus Harvard. The way the game calling was in the gameplay, it just was very reminded me of a college football game there. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It shocked me. Did you know he had 27 carries in that game? A quarterback. Cam Newton doesn't even do that, so that is just sad.
It is. So another guy out there that you may be tempted to look at, but I would encourage you to stay away from Josh Rosen, 95% available, playing the Chargers. They allow the 10th fewest points to quarterback this week. They got Joey Bosa back. Now, he had some condition issues, didn't play a lot. You watch the game, he don't look like the old Joey Bosa. He's a little bit out of shape there, but he's going to get in better shape, and that defense is playing quite a bit better there. If you look at Josh Rosen, he's still trying to figure things out. Now, versus Oakland, right, he did throw 3 touchdown passes, but he also had 2 interceptions, but he only completed in that game 9 passes against a bad Raiders defense for 136 total yards. That's not that good, so stay away from Josh Rosen.
Yeah, and then my final guy to talk about to stay away from is Marcus Mariota. 59% available. I think some people might want to pick him up, put on their roster. However, he plays the Houston Texans, who give up the 6th fewest points to quarterbacks. That's been a big shift from last year to this year. They've been far more efficient on the offense, and that defense has really started to lock things down. And on top of that, in case you didn't know, he hurt his elbow. He didn't finish the game. Blaine Gabbert actually finished the game. And so even if he does play, there's going to be some issues with that. The elbow is a huge part of the throwing mechanic and that strength and his ability to do that. We'll see if he plays or if he doesn't. Honestly, you have to assume that he's going to play. But are you going to assume that he's going to play well? I'm going to say no. Again, tough matchup, and really hasn't been throwing the ball a whole lot this year. And that wide receiving core is just not a great system. And so definitely make sure to stay away from him.
Yeah, in fact, that elbow injury is the one he had earlier in the year when he injured that, and the coaches said it limits him from making certain throws. And so that was the injury that he had. He kind of re-injured it, aggravated that. And so you looked at the struggles he had early in the year with that same injury. There's a million reasons why staying away from him is worth it. So
exactly.
Let's get to our running backs.
Yep.
So a guy out there that you need to consider is Gus Edwards, running back of the Baltimore Ravens, who is 99% available. This guy should be flying off the waiver wire this week. Now, he's a rookie from Rutgers who's 6'1", 238 pounds. He's got good size. Now, if you look at before him, the guy that was really the guy there was Al Collins. He had a touchdown today, but he struggled again in that game. Al Collins, in a great matchup, only had 7 carries for 18 yards, 2.6 yards per carry, not very good. Against a defense he should have been able to exploit. He didn't do it. He's really taken a step back this year. Look at last year, he had a 4.6 yards per carry. Everything was trending upwards for Al Collins. This year, currently, his yards per carry is 3.6. He's also lost 3 fumbles of the year, and he's gotten the coach's doghouse over that, and so that's not good. Look at Gus today. He crushed it. 17 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown, 6.8 yards per carry. Look at back in week 6, he had 10 carries for 42 yards. That was really the first time that we got to look at this guy, first time he had any carries. In fact, that was the first week he had any carries at all. Now, since then, his role has increased since week 6. The Ravens don't really have incentive or investment to feel pressure to stick with Collins at this point, and so Gus could easily become their starting running back there. And in Week 12, he faces the Oakland Raiders, allowing the 7th most points to running backs there, so I really like Gus Edwards this week.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. That's very solid. I especially like, if you're playing for the New England Patriots and you start to prove yourself a little bit as a running back, that takes time. They're not keen to put a guy in and give him tons of carries. Baltimore's not that way. They lean on their running game, especially with the Lamar Jackson situation, which you have to remember, and they're going to play the hot hand, and they're going to put the guy in who's performing, and that's Edwards, so I think he's a very solid pick.
Yep.
All right, another guy is Josh Adams. Surprised to me to see that he is 70% available. He's been performing well. If you're looking for a running back, this is definitely a very good option. For one, he plays the Giants, who give up the 11th most fantasy points to running backs, so that's very solid. And I think one of the things that was a concern for him going as he slowly worked into that role, and finally I think this game really proved himself to be the starting running back in that offense right now. The one concern they had with him that he was kind of finally able to maybe prove he was able to do a little bit was that they used him in the passing game, and so that was very nice to see. Unfortunately, they got absolutely crushed. I think they lost by 41 points, which happens to be I believe the greatest margin of loss by any Super Bowl defending champions or something like that. But despite that, his 7 carries for 53 yards, 7.6 yards per carry, he was effective in the running game despite that offense struggling, and he had 3 catches for 19 yards. So Josh Adams is a very good option. Definitely seemed to be taking over that backfield.
Yeah, I like him. So I can't believe I'm going to talk about this guy. Frank Gore is 75% available out there. I love Frank Gore. He's had a great career. Sounds like he's a great guy. But he's 35 years old. This week coming up, he plays Indianapolis, allowing these 9th most points to running backs. So why should you take a look at the guy? Well, 7 consecutive weeks he's had double-digit carries. This coach is committed to giving him the ball. Okay. Now, he hasn't had a yards per carry of over 4 since 2014, but currently his yards per carry is very healthy at 4.5. He's not used a lot in the passing games. Kenny Drake often comes in and spells him in situations like that, and so his value is in standard leagues. With that said, you have to be in a very large league and you have to be somewhat desperate to start him. And here's why I would say that. He's only had 1 touchdown on the year, playing for a below-average offense, so he carries some risk there. And I don't understand this. I don't know why the Dolphins don't commit. Once again, nothing against Frank Gore. I love the guy. I love that he's been effective at age 35. But the better, more explosive running back is Kenyon Drake. When he's had increased carries last year and this year, increased touches, he's been effective. It reminds me a lot of you look at the Aaron Jones and the Jamal Williams situation in Green Bay. For the longest time there, they were just hesitant to commit to Aaron Jones, even though everybody could look at that and clearly see who the better running back is. Same in this situation. But with that said, the coach loves Frank Gore. He's committed to him. He gives him the ball all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You hate to pick a guy who's old like that, but sometimes the numbers are the numbers. They seem like they're going to keep giving him the ball, so why not? All right, what about another guy, Peyton Barber? I know some people are surprised. They thought Ronald Jones Jr. was going to come in here and take over the job and be fantastic. And I even said it from the very beginning of the year, going back to right after the draft when Ronald Jones Jr. was first picked, that I still like Peyton Barber better. And you know what? He's gotten stronger as the year's gone on, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to pretend you that Barber's been great all year. Barber struggled early. But he has gotten better as the years goes on, as the year has gone on. Over the last 6 games, 3 of those games he's gone for over 80 yards. He's had 4.3 yards per carry, which isn't terrible, it isn't great, it's just doable, right, in that offense. But today, this last week, he had 18 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. He looked pretty explosive. I saw the touchdown, it looked very good. And so, again, a guy who's 40% available, who is going to get you 80 to 100 yards, maybe a touchdown, like that's a pretty good option at this point in the season.
Let's talk about Doug Martin for the Raiders out there. He is 43% available. Playing the Ravens next week allowed the fewest points to running backs. In fact, today they shut down Joe Mixon there. He had another productive game, 10 carries, 52 yards, but down the stretch they really went to mostly Jalen Richard. Some would say Richard, some would say Richard, I guess however you want to. Anyways, down the stretch there, it seemed like they went more to Jalen quite a bit there. When I look at the two, if I look at Jalen, if I look at Doug Martin, for me, I think Rashaad gives Carr in that offense really the most versatility. He's got good hands. He's good in the passing game. He's great in space. And with the Raiders' lack of wide receivers, I think his role is going to increase. And so I like Doug Martin out there. When he has touched the ball, he has been effective. I just don't know if the volume's there to trust. And so I think that the better play is probably Jalen. But I want you to talk about him. Let's look at him real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of a tough situation, kind of the way things are splitting. He played well, 11 carries for 61 yards and 5.5 yards per carry the other day, but his value is as a pass catcher. Today he had 3 catches for 32 yards. Heck, on the season he has 51 catches. It's a weird situation for me where I think they're both okay. I don't necessarily trust either of them, except that I would say that I trust Jalen in PPR leagues. He certainly has added value, and you know what? We saw like last year, it was Chris Thompson was actually a fairly valuable running back, like top 25 or top 30 because of his receptions and whatever. And so, yeah, I like him in PPR. I don't necessarily like any of them in standard. Honestly, I try to stay away from that. I don't know if you agree with me or what you think, but he's been fairly effective, very limited on the ground.
All right. So Rashaad Penny, I want to talk about him a little bit. Rashaad Penny is 48% available out there. He will have some value moving forward to now and the end of the season. Each week he's looking better and better, looking like the guy they spent a first-round pick on. Now he started the year slow, but he's having a nice rookie season. Currently he's got a 4.8 yards per carry. Look at the first 3 weeks, he really struggled quite a bit. First 3 weeks he had 43 yards on 20 carries. That's a 2.15 yards per carry. That's brutal, right? Since then, he's had 257 rushing yards at a 6.11 yards per carry. He had one game he had over 100 yards rushing against the Rams. He's got very good hands in the passing game there. Now, the one downside of this is if you look at Seattle, it's really becoming a running back by committee. You got Carson, Davis, and Penny. So that lowers his value a little bit, but I would say this. His value is lowered in redrafts, but right now, if you're in a dynasty league, you got to own this guy because looking ahead to next year, it looks to me like he's going to be their lead back. And so that would be my take on Penny. Anything you want to add before we move on?
No, I agree completely. All right, so Royce Freeman, 48% available. He's a pretty simple guy. He's a standard league guy. He's going to get you a pretty good amount of carries. He's not going to get you a lot of yards, and he's not really going to catch the ball too much. In fact, to be honest, I like Phillip Lindsay better, but of course he's not as available. Again, 48% available. He's available in about half of all leagues. He's a real standard league guy. He finds the end zone. He reminds me of, he's almost like a modern day fullback in that he's not great at some of these other things, but he's a physical runner. He gets the job done like that. In the last 8 games, he's had 5 touchdowns. So if you're looking for a running back in a standard league, he might be an okay option. Again, he's not fantastic, but there seems to be enough carries for both him and Phillip, and so maybe this trend can continue. I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Talk about a quick few other running backs very quickly, guys, that maybe aren't widely available out there or some different consideration. One guy that is widely available that you want to consider is Dante Foreman, 89% available, the running back for the Texans. He's a guy that, once again, doesn't have a lot of value. He's probably not going to see a lot of the field or definitely not going to help you in your fantasy season. But if you're in a dynasty league, he's a great stash to pick up right now and see how he does at the end of the season going into next year. You could have yourself a really solid starting running back there.
Yeah. Now, he's not available in a lot of leagues, but don't forget about Matt Breida, who's out there in 17% of leagues. He's been really banged up, and he's struggled because of it, but this could be a very good week for him. Not only is he playing Tampa Bay, who gives it the 10th most fantasy points to running backs, but he's finally getting healthier, and it showed last game. He had 17 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown, as well as 3 catches for 31 yards. So he's looked a lot better as he's gotten healthier. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to use him and he continued to trend upward.
Another guy out there that's not widely available, but you need to consider is Duke Johnson, 28% available out there versus Cincinnati, allowing the second most points to running backs. He has huge value in PPR leagues. He averaged 63 catches between 2015 and 2017. He's had 4 more catches in 4 of the last 5 games. He's a great flex play in PPR leagues, so that's a guy that you want to consider out there.
All right, and then the last guy, at least that I want to mention, is Austin Eckler. He's 32% available, and he plays a very good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, who give up the 4th most points to fantasy running backs. It's not great. Of course, he's not the starter over Melvin Gordon, but that whole team is playing well. He does seem to be getting the ball a little bit, and again, easy matchup. Could capitalize on that this week for sure.
Final running back I'm going to mention to you out there is Derrick Henry, 33% available out there. This week playing Houston Texans, who allow the 11th fewest points to running backs. Now, I'm not a big Derrick Henry fan. In fact, we warned him all preseason, and I think he's kind of proven that we were right about our prediction. He struggled quite a bit. Now, last week he had a decent week, and he followed that up with what would appear to be a good week this week. Here's the numbers he had this week. 9 carries, 46 yards, 5.1 yards per carry. But if you watch the game, what you notice was almost all those carries happened when that game was out of hand and they were way behind and they were throwing quite a bit. And if you watched it, the Indianapolis defense was playing the pass. And so I think he got a lot of carries there when that line was soft. They weren't loading the box. They weren't playing the run. And so I think that the numbers are a little exaggerated there. With that said, though, it's really hard to ignore any running back out there that has a potential of getting carries and getting looks. He's a guy that if you're in deeper leagues, I would stash him and just see what he does. But once again, I still think Deion Lewis is a running back to own on that team.
All right, so let's get in here now. Let's talk about some wide receivers. What about DJ Moore? For one, I'm excited to talk about rookies. I feel like we never get to talk about rookie wide receivers. They seem to disappoint very often, but DJ Moore has not been a disappointment lately. While his targets have been down lately, he really stepped up this last game and proved why he was a first-round pick. He had 7 catches for 157 yards and a touchdown, and I absolutely love it. You know, we saw the combine numbers were there. They drafted him. We saw the physicality was there, and we thought he was going to be able to do it, but you never really know. And again, he did struggle a little bit, but then he finally seems to be clicking. I like that he's playing an offense for Carolina, you know, for Cam Newton that desperately needs a wideout, and they play Seattle, gives up the 12th most fantasy points to receivers. That's not a ton, but that's pretty good matchup, and so I like DJ Moore, especially in dynasty/keeper leagues. Definitely worth a spot on your roster.
Another guy out there you need to consider is Traquan Smith. 75% available. He had a great preseason, but at the start of the year, he didn't get a lot of looks. He didn't see the field quite a bit. And the reason why is the coaches said he was struggling to understand the playbook and the complicated offense that the Saints run. But as he started to grasp the offense, he saw more time on the field, more targets, and production. And of course, he was trending upwards. And after a big week 5 in which he had 3 catches, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns, everything looked great for this guy, right? Talked him up in the preseason. He looked really good. Started to see the field. Started to produce numbers. And then they did the strangest thing. They signed Dez Bryant. I think that confused a lot of people. You know, you had Cameron Meredith there. Traquan Smith was getting better, and all of a sudden you bring in Dez Bryant. So how do you interpret that? And then to top that off, in week 10 he gets no targets. And so a lot of people, he was trending upwards and he's trending down. But then today he goes off. Guy has 10 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. And so we're just reminded of how talented he is, what he did in the preseason, how they love this guy. He's got some great matchups coming up. He's going to play Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, and Carolina. All defenses allow a lot of points to wide receivers. So once again, Traquan Smith, 75% available out there. You got to pick this guy up, especially going back to what you said. If you're in a dynasty league, he looks decent this year, but he's going to look even better in the years to come.
Absolutely. What about another fairly young guy is Kiki Kuti? If I'm saying that correct, probably not, but who cares at this point. He's 70% available. I like that he plays Tennessee. Tennessee gives up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Again, it does get boring for us constantly just repeating. They give up the 9th most or the 8th most, but it matters, right? Matchup is important. On top of that, last week you advised waiting on starting Kiki based on just kind of seeing what Thomas does and how that offense is. But Thomas got 1 target, and Kiki was very, very active. He had 9 targets for 5 catches and 77 yards. So I definitely like him.
Yeah, ever since Demaryius Thomas got traded there, Kiki was injured, he wasn't on the field together. So this was the first time we got to see them both on the field together just to find out, target distribution, who's going to have a bigger role. And it was clear after today that Kiki is the guy that's going to have a bigger role in that offense over Demaryius Thomas. And so he came right back and had a significant role there. So, of course, with Will Fuller out for the year, I like him down the stretch. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If Will Fuller was there, I just couldn't go near him. But because he is gone, that opens up this spot. And then, of course, like you said, watch the battle and see. And he seems to be winning it over Thomas right now.
Another guy out there is Courtland Sutton, wide receiver for Denver, 44% available, playing Pittsburgh this week, who gives up the 13th most points to wide receivers. He had 3 catches, 78 yards today. This guy's got potential. He's got talent. He's looked good at times. I do think he has a limited ceiling playing in the Denver offense. I'm not a huge fan of Case Keenum, but he's a guy that's hard to ignore for a lot of you out there in very large leagues. I know many of you message us, you're in 16-team leagues. That's a large league. That waiver wire is picked apart at this point, so he's a guy that can have some value for you in the right matchup.
All right, so what about another guy to mention is Marquise Goodwin. Now he's 59% available. That's fairly available. Of course, he plays Tampa Bay. That defense is brutal, just awful this year, giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers. And this guy is a very fast guy, a bit of a speedster, and he's very boom or bust. He's had 4 touchdowns in the last 7 games. Last game, he had 4 catches for 69 yards. Those kind of deep play balls, that's what he does, kind of all or nothing with him. And so, yes, it is a gamble, but if you're looking for a high upside play, maybe you take a chance on Marquise Goodwin.
Another guy out there is Danny Amendola. Danny Amendola is 60% available versus Indianapolis, who allow the 9th fewest points to wide receivers. Now, Danny should only be started in PPR leagues. And I would say in PPR leagues as a wide receiver 3 or flex play, and you can't even start him every week. It's really matchup based. With that said, since week 6, he's averaged over 6.2 catches per game. That's really solid. So if you're in a PPR league, he's a guy that is not great. I think he's got a very safe floor, but a very limited ceiling. But for some of you out there, he'll be a quality play.
All right, at 60% available, Anthony Miller. This is a guy to definitely stash on your bench if you're looking in a keeper league or a dynasty league. But on top of that, does have some value for this season. And while they play the Detroit Lions to get the 8th fewest points to wide receivers this week, he might be worth a pickup for future weeks because of the way he's been performing. In fact, he's had 3 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. He's played very well. In fact, we saw the way he played against Detroit the last game that they played them. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown. So maybe he can repeat that. Again, they do shut down wide receivers, do fairly well against them, but that didn't seem to bother him last time, and he's really been getting hot lately. So don't forget Anthony Miller.
We've actually talked about this quite a bit. Christian Kirk is out there. He is 67% available. Plays with the Chargers this week, allow the 11th fewest points to wide receivers. And it's somewhat risky picking him up and starting with Josh Rosen, the quarterback there, who's a rookie, who's struggling to figure some things out there. But he's had some nice games, and he's readily available. 4 times this season, has over 77 receiving yards, and he's had touchdowns 2 of the last 3 games. So this guy's very talented. I like his potential. I do think he's limited because Josh Rosen out there, but once again, he's widely available. He could be a sneaky play for you.
All right, so now we'll get into just talk about a few quick hitters. I don't know how many there are. I believe I only personally have one, and that's Robbie Anderson. He's 75% available, and he plays New England. There's not a lot to say about him. He's not a great option, but he is an option. That's kind of what I have to say about him. He was a good wide receiver. He looked good last year, and he hasn't been fantastic this year. I just think that quarterback situation isn't awesome.
Yeah, I think the quarterback situation is what's hindering him. With that said, against the Patriots there, I assume they're going to have to play throw behind. They're going to be playing from behind. They'll have to throw a lot. So I think that bodes well for him in that game. But otherwise, yeah, he's a guy that's got limited value there. Another guy I want to talk about is Pierre Garçon. Pierre Garçon is 80% available. He is playing Tampa Bay, allowing the 2nd most points to wide receivers there, so not a bad play. And I think you've got a couple more there.
Yeah, so a guy that isn't very highly available, only 17% available, but absolutely worth it if he's out there, is Doug Baldwin. Now, I have to give props to you. You did the video last week. You talked about Doug Baldwin. You said that this was going to be the first week he scores a touchdown. You guys can actually go back and watch the video and see that. And you know what? For the first week this season, he scored a touchdown. 7 catches, 52 yards and a touchdown. He looked good. Guys, he's been banged up. He's struggled. But you have to remember, Russell Wilson's his quarterback, and he's Russell Wilson's favorite target when he's healthy, and he's getting healthier. That for me is 3 reasons to start to feel more confident as the year goes on. So he's not highly available, but if he is available, you shouldn't be wasting his talent in free agency, just letting it sit there. You should pick him up.
Last wide receiver I want to mention to you that's not widely available, but you need to consider if he is, a Sterling Shepard, 20% available, playing in Philadelphia, allowing the 3rd most points to wide receivers. And so those are a few names to consider there. Let's get to our tight ends.
All right, now, so I'm up with the first tight end. That is David Njoku. Now, he's 26% available, and you got to love his matchup. Plays Cincinnati. Cincinnati, for whatever reason, they're not matching up against tight ends very well. They give up the 2nd most points to tight ends. While he was a little bit quiet against Atlanta and Pittsburgh the last couple of weeks, in week 8 and week 10, getting tired after all that research and prepping things, but he's been very productive over 5 weeks, averaging 56 yards and 5 catches. That's very good for a tight end, especially if you're trying to find one in free agency, right? That's different than, you can't expect quite starter level material. And then again, another thing that's absolutely huge that you can't undervalue is the quarterback play. And Baker Mayfield has been improving. He's been getting better, and that is absolutely huge in the development of David Njoku as a fantasy option, and so I like him.
Right. Another guy out there is Jack Doyle, 28% available. Andrew Luck is the hottest quarterback in the NFL. Let me say that again. Andrew Luck is the hottest quarterback in the NFL. He's hotter than Pat Mahomes. No disrespect to him. But right now, Andrew Luck is looking great. 24 touchdown passes in the last 7 games. If you look at Pat Mahomes, he's got 17 over the past 6. We'll see what he does tomorrow night. I'm sure he'll add to that number quite a bit. But once again, Andrew Luck is so hot. Another thing, if you look at it, Andrew Luck targets his tight ends at a higher percentage rate than any other quarterback in the NFL. He loves to throw to his tight ends. Now, Eric Ebron's success does bring down Doyle's value a little bit, but Doyle's Luck's favorite target and a safety valve for him that he loves to use often. And so if he is out there for you, I think he's a great pickup.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, you remember how Ebron struggled in the past few years. Ebron is very much a product of the system, and I firmly believe Doyle's the better tight end. All right, 93% available is tight end Chris Herndon. Now again, he plays New England, who gives up the 6th most points to tight ends. New England's going to score their points. He's Tom Brady in that offense, and so I like that. They're going to have to throw the ball, and then 4 of the last 5 weeks, the rookie tight end, he's increased his production and usage. Right? Being a rookie is so great when you look at their fantasy value because they can grow from week to week. Week 1 and week 8 players look so different, and he's been on this real stretch where he's gotten better. Of course, we live in a world, we've talked about this all preseason, where tight ends, rookie tight ends specifically, aren't great. It takes them time to develop, but that's fine. We're getting further into season. He's developing along, and again, if you're looking for an option and a very highly available option, this is probably your best guy.
Another guy out there that's widely available is Juno Smith, 93% available, the tight end for the Titans there. Today goes out, he had 6 catches, 44 yards. The last 3 weeks, he's actually seen an increase in production. He's got better. He's a sophomore there, 2nd year in the league. Concern I had is he's a guy that I had down here as a nice option who's improving. I thought he would have value, but with Marcus Mariota's injury, I think it sours his value a little bit out there. But he is getting more involved in that offense. He is improving. And so if you're very desperate, you could give him a shot. Take a look at some defenses.
All right. So there aren't too many defenses out there that we're going to talk about. We'll try to go through this very quick. But one, of course, is Jacksonville. Surprises me to see that Jacksonville is actually 34% available. That means for every 3 people watching, 1 of you will be able to pick them up, which is huge. And on top of that, they play the absolutely horrendous, awful, non-existent offense that is the Bills. Their quarterback situation is bad. Their offensive line, their receivers, their running backs, it's all awful. They give up the most fantasy points to defenses. Jacksonville is a great start this week and way more available than they should be. It's very surprising to see.
Defense I want to talk about is New England, 41% available, playing the Jets. The Jets give up the 5th most points to defenses. That's another great matchup out there that's readily available.
All right, and then I also like the Indianapolis Colts. They're 75% available, right? We try to get some defenses out there that's very available, and Indianapolis Colts are one of them. They play Miami, who gives up the 10th most points to defenses, and I love what you talked about. Andrew Luck is the heart, not only of that offense, of that team, but of that organization, honestly. They work around him, and he has played fantastically lately, and I love that. They're going to force the Miami to throw the ball. They're going to force Miami to try to score some points, and I'm excited to see what they can do. If they can put points on the board and keep them from running the ball with Frank Gore, real slow offense like they like to do, they're definitely going to force some turnovers. So I very much like the Colts this week if you're looking to kind of plug and play.
Another defense that's widely available out there is the Buffalo Bills, 86% available, playing the Jaguars, who allow the 7th most points to defenses. Now, if you look at the Bills' defense, 4 times this year they've had double-digit points scored in fantasy. They're playing Blake Bortles, who's turnover-prone there, and so a lot of people are going to overlook the Buffalo Bills this week, but they're a nice streaming option. So
absolutely.
So I think that's it. Anything you want to add to the video? Do you want to close us out there?
No, that sounds good. Guys, if that wasn't enough for you, of course, absolutely ask questions. We love to talk to you about this sort of stuff. We apologize if we ever miss your question. We don't intend to do it, but sometimes it happens. Guys, thank you so much for watching. You have a great day, and God bless.